evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to this the September 1st edition of Beyond the Headlines. My name is Colin Dowe, and I will serve as your host this evening. And as per usual, thank you so very much for making us a part of your Monday evening. So whether you're tuned in to GBN Television, listening on GBN Radio, or tuned in via any of our social media platforms, thank you. And happy Kirani James Day. It is September 1st. We started off a month ago and we were talking about emancipation. Of course, we then got into Carnival. So I digressed a little bit last week, but we're back on theme, as it were, it seems, for the last month, because reparative justice is a conversation that we're having. And online, I will deliberately start there. We have the chair of the Grenada National Reparations Committee, Arlie Gill. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dowe, and allow me to thank GBN for having us to discuss the issue of reparative justice. The issue of reparations, of course, is probably one of the most premier global discussions that is around now, and we are grateful for the opportunity to share with our fellow citizens on the issue of reparative justice. So thank you for having us.
Absolutely not a problem at all. Beyond the Headlines with the thrust of education and upliftment for Grenadians. Also on is researcher. We know him well, not just in terms of Grenadian history, but all he has brought to the table. Dr. John Angus Martin. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to the discussion.
Oh, absolutely. And the third member of the committee, Mr. Rochelle Charles. Rochelle, welcome.
Thank you very much, and it's nice to be here. So the Rastafarian could have a voice. We never had a voice before. Thanks much for that.
Absolutely, absolutely. John, allow me to start off with you. I'm saying John Angus.
They're all my names, so it's okay.
Good. So, I'll start at the beginning of the alphabet. Angus, right? Who comprises the Grenada National Reparations Committee?
We have probably 6 of us, 7, 8. Mm-hmm. We have several different members. We have people in Grenada, we have people overseas. It's a combination of academics and just people willing to go to bat for this issue. I guess we've been around since 22, mm-hmm. I think, as a group. And I think when we got together then, we didn't have any idea that we would be in the position we are today. I think it's pretty surprising.
So it was one of social consciousness that brought you together, and then it moved to being a national committee?
Right. Well, no, it developed from the CARICOM committee, and Ali would be able to probably give more of the background on that. And it's a cabinet appointed position as a membership to the committee. Okay. So it's people that were picked to represent Grenada in a way, and have represented since.
What would you say in a broad sense is the mandate of the GNRC?
Well, I think it's to create awareness. I think that was probably the initial in Grenada, and to advocate in whatever way we could with the other national committees across the region and with the CARICOM committee itself, mm-hmm. to advocate for reparations and reparative justice, and spread and educate Grenadians, I guess, as well, about what it is and what it is we're looking at. So I think I think we have a lot of work to do still. I think we have accomplished a few things, but I think we have a lot of work still to do, especially when it comes to education, the education part of it.
Okay. Ali, as chair of the GNRC, I know you would be linking quite a bit with your CARICOM counterparts. So when was the CARICOM Reparations Commission formed, and what is their mandate?
The CARICOM Reparations Commission was established in 2013. It was an initiative pioneered by Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. At the time, Prime Minister Kamla Bissessa from Trinidad was the chair of CARICOM at the time. And that initiative was unanimously adopted by all of the heads at that time in 2013. So CARICOM Operations Commission, the mandate of which was that for every CARICOM member state to have a committee or commission, whichever name they choose, that would feed into this CARICOM Operations Commission. Of course, that has been chaired from its inception by Professor Hilary Beckles, University of Western's Vice Chancellor. The number one mandate was to advise the heads of government of CARICOM on this thorny issue of reparations. Now, reparations is not an issue that is 10 or 12 years old. From the very time that slaves were emancipated, they clamored for reparative justice since 1834, since 1838. Then throughout our history in the Caribbean, we have had leading intellectuals from Dr. Eric Williams, Marcus Garvey, you name them. Out of St. Lucia, our Nobel laureate, the economist, well-known economist Lewis, and so on, advocating for reparative justice. So it's not, let us never think that it is a recent topic or recent initiative by the CARICOM heads just 2013, but I would say at 2013, it was then formalized and adopted by CARICOM heads to push this initiative to reparative justice. We in Grenada, when I was appointed CARICOM, Grenada's ambassador to CARICOM, that was one of the areas, one of the roles of the CARICOM Grenada's ambassador to CARICOM is to ensure that initiatives taken by CARICOM is pushed at the member state level so that, we avoid slips through the cracks. Not everything that the Minister of Foreign Affairs and so might be able to follow up on. And that one of the issues that we were lagging behind was this whole issue of reparations. And I took it to the then Minister of Foreign Affairs at the time, and I said, of CARICOM Affairs at the time, and I said, listen, we need to move on that initiative. So first of all, around 2019, 2020, we had what we called a committee where we started to have that discussion of how we should frame, how we should develop this National Reparations Committee, and that we had some advisors. And then now we've had, so for instance, you will see that Mr. Rochelle Charles is representing the Rastafarian on the Reparations Committee. We also have someone of Kalinago descent on the Reparations Committee. Then we have, as Angus rightfully pointed out, we have historians, other academics, public relations persons, and so on. And of course, one of our mandates is to advise the government of Grenada and so with regards to the issue of reparative justice, is to also create awareness within our own society and the Grenadian public as to what this reparations issue is really about, and to champion the cause for reparative justice to Grenada and Grenadians. Of course, we work in tandem with our CARICOM brothers and sisters through the CARICOM Reparations Commission. And I think that from 2013 to now, the region, we have made tremendous strides. The CARICOM is looked at in terms of leadership on the issue of reparations. This year, the African Union, for instance, have declared this year as the year for reparative justice within the African Union. And August 6th and 7th this year in Addis Ababa, I'm not sure who will comprise the Grenada delegation, but I expect that maybe Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell and Foreign Affairs Minister Handel may be attending in Addis Ababa this year. Reparations is front and center of the African Union CARICOM heads of government meeting in Ethiopia. So we have been, and also too, we have been able to successfully put the subject of reparations on the agenda of the United Nations, so that you have United Nations organizations like UNESCO and so on having roundtable discussions on the issue of reparations. And we were able to also have this year the declaration of the second decade for people of African descent. In fact, yesterday, August 31st, was the International Day for people of African descent throughout the world. So that through the efforts of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, and of course through our heads of government who continue to lobby publicly through different international fora, we believe right now that the subject of reparative justice has gained global recognition.
Okay, thank you. Rochelle, if you can start, and any of you can join in if you have additions. What is the basis for the call for reparations, and why now? As Ali pointed out, when the slaves were emancipated in 1834, and when they actually got some level of freedom, 1838, they made the call. But it seems to be a front burner issue, and Ali went through highlighting the focus that has been brought to it internationally now. But what is the basis for this call, and why now?
Well, actually, it's not now. It's decades now. We as a people, Rastafarian, been seeking reparation, repatriation. But now, we wasn't getting nowhere because, as I told you, we hadn't a voice. But through the passage of time, we noticed that the CRC, CARICOM Reparation Commission, and the GNRC, Grenada National Reparation Committee, which is working together, realize it is the person that is in there is distinguished scholars, civil and human rights activists. So we now decide, well, that is the way forward. You have to get yourself in there. And there was a call. So we answered the call. And now we're seeing progress. Because you see, we as a people that came from a long time ago and suffer. So give me the time to go through certain things. We suffer through transatlantic slave trade. We suffer in Africa because they kidnap us. They store us in forts with dungeon 15 feet below the surface with very little ventilation. So we suffer and die. Wherever we've been captured, we walk to the fort with shackles and chains. By the time you get from point A to point B, the shackles will take the skin off and the flesh off, and the bone and the chain and the shackle will be eaten. So you can imagine the pain. And you have to walk without feeling pain then. You have to ignore the pain because you will be beaten and brutalized. And when you get to the camp, to the fort, they will cut your hair off, and then they will brand you with a hot iron and put you down in a dungeon. For minutes become hours, hours become days, days become weeks, weeks become months. You're in the dungeon with no hygiene, no water for sure, no toilets. There's a courtyard, and each fort had cells, 5 cells. They could take 200 persons at a time. The cell was built for 50 persons. So they put 200 in there. And there's a courtyard. There you go. And when you want to relieve yourself. And when they depend on the rain to come to wash that waste down in the drain around the courtyard. And if it doesn't come for a week or two, that waste is coming over. Mucus, blood, vomit, you got to walk in that. So you're living in that day with no ventilation, so you're in a stink, getting more stink, and you have to live with that. For these reasons, we have to seek some form of compensation. Now, even before leaving the shores of Africa, 4 million people died in those two forts, like Fort Cape Coast Castle and Elmina Fort. That was the most two deadly forts, and 32 forts along 300-mile stretch of land belongs to Ghana. There was a total of 70 forts on the west coast, but 32 was in Ghana. And the two deadly forts, Cape Coast Castle and Elmina Fort. And you sitting there waiting, pray God that you get on a ship. But when you get on a ship, it's not a bed of roses, because you go in on a ship with less room than a coffin. A male have 18 inches wide, a female 13 inches, and a child 12 inches. And from the floor to the ceiling is 4.5 feet. You cannot start upright. Your best bet is to lie down for 6 weeks, a journey. So you come to the islands and to Americas, and it's not easy, because you're set to work in the fields 18 hours a day, 16 hours a day. If you're working in a factory, you will see axes hang up in the factory. So if you get caught in one of the wheels, your hand get caught, they chop it off. If your foot get caught, they chop it off. That's what the axes in the factory is about. And harsh condition. And the bad thing about it, after slavery abolished, the Atlantic slave trade abolished in 1833. The Queen paid £20 million to the plantation owners. 1834, slavery abolished. But the apprenticeship that they organized, because these people figured they didn't get enough for the money because they bought it, and they figured they didn't get enough. So they designed this apprenticeship that went on until 1838. And after 1838, when they set you free, they give you nothing. For all the years you work, no money, no housing, no lands, no nothing. They set you free. So you have to start from scratch. Not even a hammer or a nail or a saw. You just have to make it. So then all these time you work, no compensation. 2.2 million people died in the Atlantic crossing. And there is countries that are responsible for that. England, Spain, Portugal, and the Netherlands. Now England is dragging foot to come in to pay, stating that they won't take taxpayers' money to pay for reparation, because they abolished slavery. But they didn't abolish slavery because they want to. Because there was abolitionists that working hard and they couldn't get through. What made them abolish slavery in the Caribbean quick is the revolt. All these islands, Grenada 1795, Trinidad 1795, Guyana Trinidad 1763, Guyana 1763, Demerara 1823, Barbados 1816, St. Vincent 1795, St. Lucia 1791, Dominica 1795, Antigua 1736, Montserrat 1778, St. Kitts 1639, Nevis 1725, British Virgin Islands 1790, Jamaica 1760, and Haiti.
So there's been protests, obviously, coming out and leading up to. Angus, if I can, why now?
I think a lot of things happened in the last few years. I think coming out of COVID, the Black Lives Matter, what happened in the US, I think all of those brought people's attention to what the descendants of enslaved people are still experiencing. I think that was probably the moment when people realized for the first time that even though people have been, nobody has been born into slavery and recently, but people realized that some things didn't change or some things were still problematic. And I think that what happened during COVID, that reaction to Floyd being killed. I think that basically brought it across the world, across the globe, where they tore down a statue in the UK of one former slave trafficker. And we see that all over in a lot of these countries where these individuals who made lots of money. Because if you look at who are the ones that were sponsoring these the journeys, the slave ships, they were all the mayors of these British cities and things like that. You know, they were prominent people. So I think they were the ones that were honored in these cities.
Right.
So I think that is some of the things that people start recognizing, that the people who were the ones that perpetuated this, I was like, why are they being honored? And the recognition has not been shared with the people who were enslaved, that they were not given anything at all.
Right.
You know, so I think all of that happened during that period brought it home. And I think that's when the advocacy as well started growing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ali, how is reparations defined? I believe CARICOM has a framework, a 5-point, definition, as it were, of reparations. If you can share that with us.
Reparation essentially means to repair the harm which was caused by one, indigenous genocide. And I do not want us to forget that at all, because when we speak of Christopher Columbus sighting the different islands of the Caribbean, of course, I believe that every Grenadian boy or girl no longer learns that Christopher Columbus discovered anywhere. Because when he came here, there were persons and societies and communities established here in the Caribbean and in Grenada. We are the Kalinagos. So that when we speak of reparative justice, we speak of the repairing of the harm which was caused by one indigenous genocide. In other words, genocide is a big word, meaning that they wipe out what we call the Americans. They wipe out the Caribs and the Arawaks. The Atlantic slave trade and slavery, which Brother Rochelle Charles went through and gave you a vivid picture of some of the horrors that our ancestors went through. And finally, of course, so we have indigenous genocide, the Atlantic slave trade and slavery as crimes against humanity. Those are crimes, and that is how we label it. That's what we say, that is what it is. By any definition of any society, of any of mankind throughout history, the indigenous genocide is a crime. To kill out an entire population of people is a crime against humanity. Slavery is a crime against humanity. The Atlantic slave trade and the conditions under which our ancestors was kept, that Brother Charles had depicted so clearly in his remarks a while ago, that those are crimes against humanity. And of course, colonialism. Now, when we speak of the impact or the effect that Atlantic slave trade and slavery and indigenous genocide, what they have caused, the legacies, what we refer to as now as the legacies of these crimes, continue to be with us up to today in the Caribbean. Yes, in other words, when we speak about the education system and the fact that in the 70s and so on, we had a limited amount of secondary and primary school places.
Ali, if I may, I just want us to, because we will come through there, but
right.
In terms of reparations, right, I want a definition of how do we define reparations? What are we asking for?
Repair,
what are we asking about?
Repair for the harm which was caused by one indigenous genocide, the Atlantic slave trade and slavery, to put simple.
Right, and when we say repair, what are we looking for? Because we must have an expectation that can be satisfied, because this is a broad term now. Repair, yes, it can be I'm sorry, and I'm done.
Right. Well, I'm saying I'm sorry repairs nothing. It may only go in so much as repairing the feelings that I may have towards you, like when you have a lover's spat. But in this particular case, what we in the CARICOM Reparations Commission envisage is that there is a economic plan which we believe will be able to go some way in repairing the ills or the harm that was caused by these crimes against humanity, which I spoke about. So that the harm which we speak of is the poor health conditions which we now suffer from, and the general underdevelopment of our societies. We are saying that these crimes against humanity, slavery and slave trade and the Atlantic slave trade and so on, cause a structural underdevelopment of our communities and societies, and at the same time created mass development in the societies of the colonizers. It is a historical fact that the Atlantic slave trade and slavery was the fuel for the Industrial Revolution in Europe and in England, and is responsible for the development in a significant way. At the same time, the reverse had happened here in the Caribbean, where we remained underdeveloped. Okay. So these are the harms. So put it simply, Colin, the harm which we speak of, and as you said, we will get into these details or the specifics later on, is the harm of underdevelopment of our people, of our societies, in health, in education, in the psychological trauma, the fact that we have persons nowadays not, appreciating their black skin and is prepared to whiten their skin or bleach their skins and so on. These are psychological trauma that our people would have endured after 400 years. So when we speak of reparative justice, we speak about repairing the harm which was caused.
Okay, Angus, Okay, Angus, I know you wanted to come in here.
Yeah, I think what you're looking for in that, Ali, because we talk about economics, we talk about money. And that can take many forms, I think. The 10 points, CARICOM 10 point, look at different aspects of that. Even cases of making available the opportunities to visit Africa, to learn about the culture and things like that. So I think there's some things that are just things to just help people.
Right. Because I've heard things of restitution.
Right.
I've heard rehabilitation. Ali touched on that a little bit. I've heard satisfaction. I've heard reference of some guarantees they're not going to do it again, right? And then compensation.
Right.
And it's a framework, my understanding, through which reparations can be viewed.
Right.
These items, one needs to be acknowledged.
Right.
Right.
That's the beginning.
And at the beginning, and then we look at restitution, in that where the oppression is discontinued, the victims' rights are recognized and allowed to flourish. Right. So my understanding of reparations, when we look at it, is not that there's a check to be written only.
It's multifaceted. I think, for me as a historian, access to archives. If we're talking about our history, our culture, we don't have an archives yet. Right. A lot of these records are in Europe. So being able to access our history, I have been to archives in France, and I've seen drawings of the fort from the 1860s, the 1660s, sorry. That whole history that goes back, that we want to talk about Grenada today, that history is not in Grenada.
Right.
How can we have access to it? So all of those things to me, and those are the easy fixes.
Right.
Those are the easy ones. But we are looking at other things. If we do get money, as in the case that we've had somebody gave a symbolic amount, what do we do with that money? That is something that I think individual places will decide how to use any of the resources that are gained through reparation. What do we want to do it for? How do we think we can attack that issue that we see that needs repairing? Where do we put those resources?
Okay, all right. I think it's time for a first break, but when we come back, I want to look at some of the accomplishments thus far of the National Committee, and then get into why is Grenada making news on reparations. Viewers and listeners, we'll be right back.
exciting news. Oasis Pet and Garden has expanded. In addition to our existing location, we're now open at our new location, Melville Street, St. George's, now serving you at 2 locations for even more convenience. At Oasis Pet and Garden, we bring you the best products at the best prices nationwide. Check out our garden department for the best quality Pro Mix potting soil, vegetable seeds, and seedling trays, cocoa peat, liquid fertilizer, granular fertilizers, and more. Our livestock and livestock products are the highest quality and the best prices in Grenada.
Asian Spa and Wellness Cafe, nestled in the serene surroundings of Le Phare-Bleu, Calivini Bay, St. George, is the perfect spot to unwind and relax after a stressful event or when you wish to spoil yourself in the most comfortable and relaxing atmosphere. They offer many different massage modalities, including thigh hammer, washer and cupping, signature thigh deep tissue massage, also facials to depuff and tighten pores, deep cleanse full body, hair and nail treatments and more. Take a walk down to the cafe for authentic Thai breakfasts and delicious traditional dishes. Choose from our special mixed drinks, both hot and cold. Opens daily. Visit Asian Spa and Wellness Cafe today, Le Phare-Bleu, Calivini Bay, St. George, because you will not regret you did.
At Oasis Pet and Garden, we bring you the best products at the best prices nationwide. We also supply black tanks and plumbing supplies. Wholesale prices available on selected items. Visit the Oasis Pet and Garden today, conveniently located along the Wester Hall Main Road, Wester Hall, St. David's, and Melville Street, St. George's, now serving you at 2 locations. Visit us today for all your pet and garden needs.
John's World is located on Halifax Street in St. George's, opposite Norm Shopping Center, and upstairs John's Boutique. It's the place to visit for all your children's clothing from 0 to adult. On sale are children's tops, pants, hats, vests, dresses, toys, and other accessories. Also blankets, hot and cold breast pads, breast pumps, car seats, strollers, walkers, playpens, footwear, pillows, hair products, and more. They're open Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. and on Saturday from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Go on down to John's World on Halifax Street, St. George's, and in Hillsborough, Carriacou, or call 459-6564 or 403-6564. You will not regret you did.
Viewers and listeners, we are on Beyond the Headlines. Reparative justice is the conversation. Angus, if you can, what are some of the accomplishments that you can think of the Grenada National Reparations Committee from its inception, born during COVID, in terms of the activity to now?
Right. Well, I think one of the earliest things that we did was actually put on an event to look at education, to educate people about reparative justice and what it is. Because I think, as we've acknowledged, when people say reparations, we think there's money coming, there's a check in the mail somewhere. It's like, just send it to the bank, they'll take care of my part of it. So I think the idea of we need to educate. We had one event, I think we need to do more of that. Not just about reparations itself, but it's also slavery and what happened after slavery and the whole colonialism and how that has affected our society and all of the ills as a result of that. So that knowledge needs to be out there. People need to become conversant with that knowledge because we are challenging a larger system that is very stubborn, especially when you look at the British. Right. And when you look at the Dutch, have been a little more forthcoming. They've made apologies and they've put money forward to actually start exploring, that whole thing of in their former colonies and things like that. So I think the first thing is that education that we really need to push some more.
Okay. Rochelle, how has the Rastafarian movement been able to keep the conversation alive when the rest of us seem not to have been bothered? As you said, it seemed to be there was a consciousness within the Rastafarian movement, but no one else was bothering with this conversation until fairly recently. How has the Rastafarian movement kept this consciousness alive over the years, and why?
Well, we as a people believe in Marcus Garvey, and through history, because Marcus Garvey had said, a people without a history of the past, origin, and culture is like a tree without root, and you know that tree is going to die. He also said, the sword is mighty, the pen is mightier, but the tongue will beat back the both of them together. So we have a consciousness since 1968, when Dr. Vernon Carrington from Jamaica opened up the 12 tribes of Israel. And our aim is we were talking about reparation and repatriation.
Right.
So that consciousness was there for a long time. But so Hilary Beckles and the CARICOM Reparation Committee and Holly Gill, Angus Martin, and with the Grenada National Reparation Committee, we fall in there. And so we was blazing that fire along, and them come and they burn it. And we have a good time with them to push it along, because our voice would not have been heard if the GNRC and the CRC was not there.
Right.
If you realize how much persons is not willing to do this and how not willing to do that, we were just a grassroots.
Right.
But now the global thing now, and the diplomacy and the talking, it wakes up the world. Not only from the grassroots, but from the higher level.
You now have the academics and others joining in.
That's right.
In that call. Okay. Ali, Tiny Grenada has been in the news for quite a bit in recent times. How? Why Grenada?
Good question. For some reason, it seems as though we are in the leadership of the advocacy of reparations in the region. One of the things that really sparked interest in Grenada is the Grenada initiative with Laura Trevelyan and the Trevelyan family. Of course, Laura Trevelyan being of BBC, a well-renowned and respected BBC journalist, when she came here to do the documentary about reparations, and then later it was made public that her family once owned slaves and plantations in Grenada, and then her family came to Grenada to do the apology, and they then pledged £100,000 and so on. That gave us global coverage, and then that sparked quite a bit of interest in Grenada. On following the heels of that, the Bank of England, as fate would have it, had owned 599 slaves in Grenada and 3 plantations. So that again gave us global coverage, especially in the UK and Europe. Over the last 2-3 weeks, just before Carnival, it was now made public that King George IV received £1,000 between 1823 and 24, and for 10 years, up to 1830 or thereabouts, directly received monies from plantations in Grenada. So for some reason, the research has been showing, indicating that the British royal family, the Bank of England, and powerful and wealthy families in Europe or in England benefited directly from Grenada. And we have, in every time that that news came out, we of the GNRC, we have taken the leadership through the CRC. We have written to the relevant stakeholder beneficiaries and so on. And Angus could tell you that we are doing our best to get the details now of this of the royal family receiving direct cash from the Grenada plantations and so on. We have written to the Bank of England, and we wrote to them under the previous government, and we're now strategizing what will be the best approach now under the Labour government. So we have had, through research that has come to light in recent times, have shown Grenada has been the center of some of these major British institutions and families. And as such, we have that information, and the GNRC have not slept on any bit of that information.
All right.
But to go back, Colin, just briefly, Angus was highlighting the achievements of the GNRC, and he spoke about the education. I would broaden it to say raising the consciousness of Grenadians. In other words, when the GNRC was set up, history being taught in schools. That was removed some years ago in the lower secondary schools and higher and primary schools. We were able to get that back in, and of course, our deputy chair, Dr. Nicole Phillip, she produced a text that can be used in the schools in Grenada on Grenadian history. So we have advocated in terms of writing our own narrative on the history of Grenada through our deputy chair, Dr. Nicole Phillips. We have lobbied as well for the 1st of August to be officially recognized as a public holiday, and for the first time this year, we have done that. We have done several annual public lectures, about 3 public lectures, and of course the education program and so on. But of course, with funding, with the secretariat and so on, we are prepared to take the work to another level, because there is a real need for us to continue driving public education in Grenada, not just on the subject of reparations, but history and national consciousness. As you are aware, we continue to lobby and clamor for the renaming of our streets and national centers throughout Grenada, so that, no longer, we do not wish to refer to Melville Street and Grenville Street and Victoria Street and so on. We believe that there are Grenadians and Grenadian institutions that have made a significant contribution to our national development post-independence, that it is high time. Like how we have Morris Bishop Highway and Morris Bishop International Airport, there are Grenadians of all walks of life who have contributed significantly, and that so, schools and roadways and community centers and so on, as Angus would say, the national monumental landscape should be renamed. We say done with this notion of Royal Grenada Police Force and His Majesty's prison and so on, and we continue to raise our voice, and in so doing, lift the consciousness of our people, because as Marcus Garvey says, emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. And that Bob Marley song is again a quotation of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Just a couple weeks ago, we celebrated Marcus Garvey's birthday as well. So all of these national, yesterday, International Day of People of African Descent went quietly. If it was Valentine's Day, I can say to you, it would not have gone so quiet. We have so many activities on days that we inherit from European and American traditions and so on. And when it concerns us as a people, last year we had we were celebrating the American tradition in November and so on, with this devil thing and so on, absolutely no relation to our people and our history. So that the GNRC is committed to educating, to agitating our Grenadian people with regards to our traditions and our history.
Okay, thank you. Angus, maybe you can just playing off of Valley there, because we're just out of August. So how do we link emancipation, reparations, and the rise of the Grenadian jab?
It is interesting to me to see Grenada, and Grenada's always assumed the role on the world stage, not always for the best reason, but now we're seeing Grenada's history and culture on the world stage. Looking at all the carnivals around, and jab and Grenada flag is more prominent. We're definitely hitting beyond our small population. But that's a testament to Grenadians and to the history and culture. I think, unfortunately, people need to be better educated about the history and about the culture, so that now they become spokespeople for it. Out there, we need to be putting out more of the truth, and of course people interpret, that's fine. But I think this is an opportunity for us. It's an opportunity for us to not just talk about our culture and put it out on the world stage, but also learn about it as well and share that with people. And I think, for one thing, I really support the idea that history of Grenada and Grenada's culture should be mandatory at every level, not just for 2 years in secondary school. That Grenada's history should be taught at all different levels. And even in tertiary, at the tertiary level, there is a history of Grenada class, but only some students take it. But I think these are some of the things we need to do. We need to have a canon, what it is every Grenadian should know at each level.
Right.
We know the colors of the flag and things like that, but it should go deeper.
But do we?
Well,
I too often hear red, green, and yellow, and ice, green, and gold.
Right. So maybe we need to standardize things in the process as well. But I think if we begin that process, looking at primary level, what kids should know, at the secondary level, the tertiary level, then we start interacting with that history, and we could become, all of us, not just a few academics or whoever, become spokespeople for Grenada on that scene, on the national
level. Let me just go back to where we were earlier. We spoke of the Bank of England. Owning, and I'm going to use the term, 599 slaves.
By default.
By default, or otherwise, they owned. King George IV, directly collecting monies for over a decade.
From plantations.
From plantations in Grenada. What does it mean to be able to link a reigning monarch with revenues generated through slavery?
It shows the extent, the depth of slave owning, plantation, slavery, all of those things, how they were embedded in British society, and that they no longer can escape. And even, I think, recently, some of this research that's coming out is the King Charles has allowed exploration of the archives to look at the involvement of the British monarch in slavery, the slave trade, and all of that.
Correct.
So there was a point, we could go back to what I think is Elizabeth I, who had funded Hawkins and those guys in the beginning. But we've always assumed that there wasn't really much, even though it was the Royal African Company and all of that. Then they found a stamp, a brand that they used to brand slaves with the royal seal, kind of thing. So we know there's a lot of involvement by the royal family. They were involved. They've also taxes and all of those things that would go in.
Is there any truth that our reference to alcohol as grog goes back to a link to King George?
It's a good story. We have lots of good stories.
Right.
And like I said, if we don't have the facts, we'll make up a good story.
Right.
And it sells. The grog.
The grog. The old grog.
The old grog, yes. So I look at it as, in the absence of data, we create good stories, and we, just like everybody, we all make up stories.
Right.
And we try to explain, our current situation using these stories and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Rochelle, let's dream a little bit and let's start where people are in terms of monies. If the British government were to accept responsibility for slavery and we were to get £10 million today, how do you believe this can be appropriately applied to start to address reparations?
Well, first thing, I would like to see the Prime Minister of Grenada do things in the interest of the people, like factories. Although the Rastafarians seeking repatriation, but I would like to see this happen before. A factory for the fishermen, so we could can all the jacks and things that you see spoiling. When they pull the seine, they get some, and some that the bony ones, they throw it away. When you could just process that, put it in a can like sardines. A factory for the fishermen. I would like to see a factory for the farmers, whereby all the products from the ground where the people see in trouble to sell in town, just take it to the factory and process that. And you get everything that we're importing. From our own things here, we have enough. And big enough to have a nectar factory and to the fruits and so on. And the third thing I would like to see is Nawasa organize a line, untreated line for the farmers in the south. So it don't cost you to treat it, and just for the plants in the dry season. The south of the island could produce a lot in the dry season if they get water. And that is the three things I would like to see happen here. But then the next thing I want to see happen is the trading to Africa with ships. Plane could carry plenty people, but ships could carry plenty cargo. I remember when I was young, those banana boat from England used to come here, and then we used to send all the raw materials, the nutmegs and the lighter and so on, skull into the boats, and all the bananas every week. All these things go in, the cocoa, everything going, and then we have to buy it back. When the revolution had do the Smilo and they do the saltfish factory, they do everything. We could do that with the first set of monies. And then we want to see the Rastafarian repatriate.
Is there access now for people of African descent in terms of getting back to Ethiopia?
Well, we have the 12 tribes of Israel have direct link with the monarch in Ethiopia. To be precise, we have contact with Zara Yaqub, that is Selassie's grandson. We brought him here a few years ago, and we're in direct contact with him. And there is land that His Emperor, His Majesty, had donated for an organized body of Rastafarian in a place called Shashamani, Ethiopia. It's there for the Rastafarian who are ready to repatriate. And this is what we'd like to see done.
And we have had some people of Caribbean descent, people of African descent from the Caribbean, including Grenadians, going back to Ethiopia.
Yes, there is Jamaica have a big population over there. Mm-hmm. Trinidadian have quite a few people there. Well, Grenada, we had one person who came back, and we sent many other persons to view the land, like spy, and see what it's like. Come back with a report of healthy lands and good for farming and all sort of things. So we know that the place is fertile and we could produce a lot. There's a lot of wasteland. And the people that was taken from there, well, even not only the West Coast people were taken from Africa, the East Coast as well. And so the contact we have with the royal family, which is very close. We could call them tomorrow, we could call them anytime. We have the overseer from Grenada, Japink, the Zebulon, Austin Bido. He directly went there and he was living in the Yaqub house. And we have a picture we took with him in Granny Town, the lake. So Austin said when he went inside the house, the first thing he noticed when he walked in is that picture with the lake with the Rastafarian and Jacob hanging on his wall inside the house. So is he have a special likeness for Grenada because we treated him well,
Right.
you know? And even Dr. Mitchell, Keith Mitchell, he really accepted him well, you know. He was invited to a cocktail we had in Secret Harbor, and Dr. Mitchell made sure that he came, present himself, give a speech, and everything was well done.
Okay.
So we know that where we're going.
Okay.
I think for me, when I think about what we can look at in terms of contributing, we lack institutions in Grenada. I said, except for the church and the government. We need more institutions. We need cultural institutions. We need educational institutions. So in thinking of what can this reparations money, if we did get that
Right.
check, I would think of creating a cultural complex, cultural campus where we have archives, museum, library, theater, creative center, so that where kids could be bused after school for classes, informal, formal, where that it really creates an environment of learning. Because I think that is something that I think is lacking. Create clubs where kids go and interact and learn different things. You know, especially now with all the technology and stuff, we need to catch up. We need to be able to compete.
Right.
And I think creating something like that, where we build our institutions, where we build our heritage. You know, we are not preserving our heritage as we should. We know very little. If, like I said, if you need anything, you need to go to Europe.
All right.
You know, so we should have these things here. If we are to study, you know, our history and our culture, we need to have that here. You know, for any of this, we can go back. You know, we can't even figure out. So when was Jab Jab playing here? We know it's been long. But we don't know when, because we have to go to Trinidad,
All right.
you know, to kind of play with some of that and kind of go backwards. So we need to have that stuff here. We need to create a national archives. We need to create a cultural center where we could chronicle the history of ourselves.
All right.
You know, if we're going to name a street after somebody, was the information on them?
Right.
You know.
And ultimately, because everything I would argue is our history. So if we're going to replace a name, we probably should know
Who we're
replacing.
For sure.
Because I would not like to think that in 100 years, somebody else comes up and start replacing some of the names that we get because they have no clue as to why they were named like that.
Yeah, who's Melville?
Right.
You know, Governor Melville. Grenville is a British official from that period.
Right.
And
Sendell,
all these,
and the tunnel was
and
a
the tunnel and
Right.
all of that, you know. So there's a joke that a tour guide, a Grenadian tour guide, was taking tourists through Sendell Tunnel, and he said they derived from they send all the slaves through. You know, and it's funny.
Send all.
Yes, send all. It's funny, but the fact it shows that there is a lack of knowledge,
Right.
and that we need to be able to be able to share that knowledge with people.
Right.
And I do think that, as Ali had alluded, the space we live in should reflect us. You know, and I think this is a good time because most of the young people have no idea what the names of the streets are.
Right.
So if you move them, they wouldn't even notice.
Right. Ali, we hear a reference to CARICOM's 10-point plan. If you can just give viewers and listeners some insights into what that entails.
And that's important because oftentimes when we speak of reparations, people think of compensation in terms of cash. And so what Rochelle and Angus just spoke of is really and truly a developmental plan. And just to point out that throughout the CARICOM region, through the repair program, there has been some research by University of the West Indies economists and developmental theorists and so on with regards to what it is that Grenada is lacking in terms of development. Where do we see investments if we were to be successful and receive these monies, what areas should be invested in for our national development? So that it is extremely important that when we speak of reparations, persons do not think or speak of individual check going into our individual bank accounts. It's nothing like that. It is a developmental plan. And the 10-point CARICOM plan is now we are under review. It was promulgated sometime in 2014. So now, in another couple of months, we should be in a position to release the new 10-point plan. But what does the 10-point plan speak to briefly? First of all, it speaks to, the first item is an apology. We believe that the beginning of healing is an apology, acknowledging that what I spoke of earlier, indigenous genocide, the Atlantic slave trade, slavery, are crimes against humanity, should apologize for so doing and to commit not to commit these crimes again. Yes, that's extremely important, so an apology. Secondly, repatriation. And Brother Rochelle Charles and the Rastafarian movement for years have been speaking about repatriation of Africans. Of course, we have been displaced and come here. But how we speak of repatriation, we are saying for those persons or those institutions that are willing to return to Africa. That's the point we are making. We're not saying that we are on a campaign to take everybody from the country. No, that's not what we are speaking about. What we are saying, for the persons, because of their philosophical and religious beliefs, if they are so minded to return to Africa, then the colonizers, they should fund the transportation and the cost of resettlement in Shashamani or wherever else for those persons who are minded to return to Africa. Thirdly, indigenous developmental programs. In an island like Dominica, you have large Kalinago communities and so on. They are in an even worse position than the normal Caribbean populations of Africans and Indians and so on and so forth. So we are looking at specific needs of the indigenous populations that still survive in the Caribbean to be addressed. We speak about technology transfer. Yes, and Angus spoke to it earlier. You have AI, you have AII, and so on and so forth. The cost of the technological development for us to catch up with the first world countries, we are saying that we need special attention to be had with regards to technology transfer from the developed countries to the less developed countries like the Caribbean, like Grenada and so on, so that we can catch up with the more developed countries with regards to technology. And you know how vibrant and dynamic that is. Every year there's a new iPhone, there's new technology and so on, and we in the Caribbean, you know, we could barely keep up with first world technological advancement. So that's an area of particular concern. We speak of debt forgiveness. Yes, since 1974, Grenada have been forever indebted. For us to catch up, so much so that for every dollar that the government of Grenada receives from its taxpayers and so on, a certain amount of these monies have to go to satisfying debts. So that's another area of development. And Angus spoke with regards to the museums and libraries and so on. We are talking about special programs for the education of our people. And then we speak of education in terms of access to tertiary education, but also that's at one level. Then also we speak of the psychological trauma that we have endured. You know, we carry names like Colin and Angus and so on and so forth. Why not Salimbi and Olafemi and so on and so forth, in terms of the consciousness of our people accepting ourselves for who we are as being of African descent and so on. All of that is extremely important. So these are summed up briefly. And one of the other issues that we are looking at in terms of the new revised 10-point plan is specifically to do with gender. Women have suffered tremendously under slavery and slavery. If you think men see trouble, women have seen more trouble. because not only did they work on these plantations and abused and tortured and so on, they were actually also sexually abused on these plantations by the colonial master. So gender is a specific area now of concern that will be added to the new revised 10-point plan. For also too, we did not have compensation as actual point in the 10-point plan. That too will be added, or reference will be made, because that's an issue where, for instance, and Rochelle spoke about it, where these persons, our ancestors, worked for centuries without being compensated. Who is going to pay for that labor? When in the 1833 Emancipation Act provided for compensation for loss of the property, and property, we speak of the slaves themselves, to the plantation owners and the slave owners. So that where's the compensation for our ancestors who worked on the plantations? Then again, now we speak of the issue of climate justice. Yes, you cannot really complete a conversation on reparative justice without us speaking about climate change, because the issues, the damage that has been caused, the irreparable damage that has been caused to the climate can be traced basically right back to the Industrial Revolution, which, as I pointed out earlier, was a fuel for the Industrial Revolution, was slavery and slave trade. So climate justice is now another very important issue when we speak of reparative justice. So in a nutshell, Colin, I think the salient points is that, one, when we speak of reparations, we're not just speaking about cash in hand. We're speaking about a comprehensive development program. The issue of public health. You know, the Caribbean and its chronic disease of high blood pressure and diabetes, for instance, because of the legacy of the diet which our ancestors were fed on the plantations, continue to afflict our societies in a very serious way. All of these issues, from education to health to public education to repatriation of the willing, to an apology and so on. That is what we speak of when we speak of reparative justice, and I can refer persons to the CARICOM 10-point plan, because obviously we may not have enough time to go through it thoroughly tonight.
All right, thank you very much. Viewers and listeners, it's time for our final break, so we'll take that break and we'll be right back.
Are you ready to take charge of your money, build wealth, and protect your family's legacy? Then join us on October 9th, 2025 at Radisson Grenada Beach Resort for your Financial Future 2.0, Legacy, Literacy, and Liberation, a one-day financial summit designed to break cycles, build wealth, and leave a lasting legacy. You'll gain real-life budgeting hacks, a money mindset reboot, steps to create generational wealth, and practical tips on investing, estate planning, insurance, health, and business finance, all from expert speakers who know how to turn knowledge into action. With 2 inspirational keynotes, 3 powerful panel discussions, and 6 breakout sessions, you will leave with your personalized action plan for success. Don't wait. Secure your seat today. Tickets are EC $350 at disruptiveleadershipconference.com/YFF. Your Financial Future 2.0. Your next chapter starts here.
Welcome to Caracou, small in size, rich in spirit. As you step off the boat, you're greeted by smiling faces and warm island vibes. Your adventure begins here. Need a cozy place to stay? The Mermaid Beach Hotel has been a favorite for years. Waterfront views, clean comfort, and located in the town. In Bogles, the Roundhouse Cottages offers rustic charm with a touch of elegance. A peaceful hideaway surrounded by nature. Prefer something private? Dowe Island Villas gives you space, sea breeze, and a home away from home feel. Wake up to the sound of waves and views that stretch for miles. We're ready to welcome you. When are you coming?
Distributed by Echo Blue Limited. Visit us on the Lansopine Main Road or call 405-4818.
Need to check your bill balance? Use the Grenlec mobile app. Open the Grenlec mobile app and tap the icon labeled Balances at the bottom of the screen. View your bill details, including your current bill balance, the due date by which you must settle your bill, the amount and date of the last payment you made. It's quick, easy, and available 24/7. Convenience at your fingertips.
Welcome back, viewers and listeners. Reparative justice is the conversation. For either of you gentlemen, and probably Ali as chair, you may want to take this on. We witnessed the pledge and subsequent handing over of £100,000 by the Trevelyan family. What has become of this money? What has been done with this money?
That resources has been on UE used by the University of the West Indies Global Campus through the Marisho House to provide, how do you call it, Colin? You are a university expert.
Scholarships, so we have Canadians getting scholarships?
Bursaries, I think, is the technical word.
Right.
To Grenadian students who are pursuing degrees at the University of the West Indies TA Marisho campus. So that is where the resources through education that has always been used for the past 2 years.
Okay. And another open question, because I know the reality of trust. Can we trust our regional leaders to appropriately manage these resources, if received, to do the developmental things that we know are important as part of our reparations call?
Definitely. I think what we need to do is to put the structures in place, and we have been clamoring for that. And we have international models that we can use. So that, first of all, we set up a CARICOM Reparations Trust Fund, so that all the monies will go into CARICOM reparations. Money specifically for Grenada, a Grenada National Reparative Trust Fund. So that, for instance, the projects that Rochelle and Dr. Martin spoke to, when is this time to draw down on these? So we are not putting these monies in the consolidated fund to pay public servant salaries. Otherwise, we will never see that money, so to speak. We set up a trust fund, and for every project and so on that the government wishes to embark upon, there will be a board that they have to make the application to, and then that board will then oversee the project. And that has been a sort of a model that Israel has used, using the German resources. You know, Germany has continued to pay reparations to the Jews, but those monies do not go directly to the state of Israel just like that. It is set up through a fund, and then the state will draw down from a board of governors, basically. So that, to answer your question specifically, I think our leaders are sensitive to that, and with all of the the accusations that we have made, over the years with regards to, our political leaders throughout the region and so on and so forth. I believe that once the proper structure is put in place in the region and locally in the individual territories, I believe the monies can be well channeled to fund the projects that we really would like to see in reparations, resources from reparations.
Allow me to be a little bit mischievous here, because Grenada is the first to receive money. Why wasn't that structure implemented?
We do not have a national reparations fund because because we will need legislation through Parliament, and I have raised this subject with the Honourable Prime Minister on that issue, that we need to establish a national reparations fund, but of course we will need legislation through Parliament.
Okay, so we've been...
So it will take some doing, basically, but we will need the lead from government to do that.
Okay, all right. From a Grenada standpoint, and either of you can answer that, what if we have to prioritize? I know that we mentioned a number of things that we wanted, and I think, Rochelle, you probably named in terms of your own priorities, touching on the fishermen, the farmers, water, Nawasa to the south. If we are to prioritize, or how will we come to what are priorities? Because I heard you in terms of farming and fishing. I heard Angus and his bias in terms of the museum and the archives. How do we go about agreeing that this should be our way forward?
I think we look at the impact, who will be impacted. Fisher communities have been one of the poorest communities. So I think we will look at those communities. I think we could do many things. And we could start things, and as resources come in, we deal with them. Because I don't think we can't say let's do this one and don't do this one, because I think for the longest while we've been putting off a lot of things,
right, and
we don't get done. But like, for example, with the archives, we've started digitizing stuff in the library, and now we cannot even digitize them because they're falling apart,
right,
because we've waited too late. So some things we just have to do. So we need to find the resources to do some of these things.
But I heard Ali mentioning that, there's a group, I don't know whether it's University of the West Indies or otherwise, looking at priorities for Grenada.
Yes.
Should someone externally be looking at priorities for Grenada? What is our involvement in contributing to what we believe should be in our national interest,
right,
to move forward?
I think you could say they're based on looking at the whole region. They can suggest.
Yeah.
But I think it really comes down to us.
Colin's the repair program.
We will be the
persons that have been leading funding
it. Think resources can.
Go ahead, Ali.
It's a repair program, but the persons putting it together, they are University of West Indies lecturers and so on, but they have been in Grenada doing consultations with government officials, opposition persons, and different persons from different sectors. And what they are doing is highlighting some developmental areas in Grenada and trying to put a cost in to it and so on and so forth. But they will not be the ones to tell us what to do first, second, and third. I believe what they are doing is making the work easier for us, because and not just Grenada, this is right throughout the CARICOM region. In fact, Grenada was not even in full silence that they started doing that study. And they will be back with us again, I believe, in the next week or two, to have further discussions with regards to the developmental program. So there are consultations on the ground. One is identifying the programs and projects and putting a cost into it.
Okay.
But obviously those things have to be submitted to government, and the government of the day would have to take the lead with regards to projects that they see fit for the people.
Okay. Viewers and listeners, 440-1252, that's the number if you would like to contribute. We certainly would like to hear your take on the reparative justice issue. Rochelle, priorities. So we look at our fisher folk, farming, certainly in terms of food security. security is important. So whether we're looking at water or just the moves towards, agro-processing in general, what would be some of the appropriate next steps in your mind?
Well, we've been there already during the revolution. We had nectars that we export, and if we follow that pattern, we could. On the early days, when I was young growing up, I remember agriculture was the backbone of the country. And without agriculture, you wouldn't stand away. Tourism is a fragile business. It could break anytime. But if you have agriculture, you have a sustained business. So I would like to put a lot of emphasis on agriculture.
Okay. Angus, you get your archives. What's next?
Well, for me, like I said, it's about building institutions. It's not, the archives is part of a larger thing about preservation of our history and culture. So for me, it's building these institutions, because right now a lot of things are individual based. Right. I'm a historian. I can come and talk about history and write a few books and things like that, but what happens when I'm not there?
Right. We have a caller online, so if we may. Good evening, caller. Welcome.
Hello, good evening to you, Mr. Dowe, and to your guests. We're talking about reparation. But I wonder if you really consider the bigger picture. We are still dependent on the capitalist, exploitative, extractive system, which in terms of offering us development or so-called development continues to destroy our environment. I heard Mr. Gill talk about climate justice and so on. But we need to start, even before that, talk about ecological debt, which the powers that which the Europeans in particular and others have refused to consider in the past. I'm saying that we could go after monetary compensation or what. But the fact they still control the monetary system, they could devalue the pound or the dollar anytime. Are we considering those factors? And then are we going to work on ensuring, and I asked Mr. Gill that a couple of years ago, and he tried to avoid it, about the food apartheid system that our people continue to face in terms of our nutrition. We're going to, rectify that. There's so much thing we need to deal with, and I don't think that we really start to surface. I'm glad that also gender is also being put on the table. But I think we need to also involve more people in the conversation, and also to see that it's not just the English speaking, but the Portuguese, Brazilians, the Ecuadorian, all where our people have been dehumanized. And I feel very bad that we're only talking about the day for African people of African ancestry after the day have passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that contribution. We still have to work within the system, Ali. Is it a system we can trust? And will it be meaningful? Mm-hmm.
Just to say that we speak here this evening on the CRC initiatives and so, but this issue of reparative justice all over the world. So Brazil, we work along with the Dutch Caribbean, French Caribbean, African, so it's a global movement. I've been in touch over the last 2 weeks with colleagues in Mauritius and so that it's a global movement. This conversation that we're having tonight is specifically with Grenada and the Caribbean, but the issue of reparations is not limited to the region. And we in the region have been, in the Caribbean region, we have been assisting other movements throughout the world, basically throughout Latin America and Africa and so on. So that has been ongoing. Mm-hmm. Yes, we continue, we work within a system. And just to say that the reparative justice will not cure or solve all of our problems and issues. We have to champion causes on other fronts as well. And as I said, the link between reparative justice and climate justice, it does involve ecological debt and so on. I mean, this program, hour and a half, really would not allow us to delve into detail in every particular subject.
Well, speaking of allowing, let us allow our next caller to voice their views. So, good evening, caller. Welcome.
Making priority medical health.
Go ahead, caller.
Good afternoon. Yes, I'm brother, sir. We like to advocate, besides food security.
Sorry, you need to go ahead. We heard food security, but we weren't hearing you after that.
Transportation to the seniors and disabled, getting them to medical health support, put that on the list of things, and having them, get around for food, make that some of the priority in the list of things that they should consider. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Taking care of our elderly, and this is now social justice, because we ought to be taking care of our senior citizens as well, as we look to that. Let me just ask this. We can't be naive. The abolition of slavery was not done for humanitarian reasons. It was an economic decision. It was no longer profitable to have slaves in the Caribbean, so slavery was abolished. That really was it. I'm not saying that the humanitarian call wasn't justified, but it wasn't what toppled the apple cart. What is the economic justification for individuals, institutions like the Bank of England, or institutions like the monarchy or others to pay reparations, to acknowledge, because if you acknowledge, it then means that you will owe. What is their motivation to do this? We might believe it's the right thing to do, but where's their motivation?
Well, we know they're not motivated. But we've seen the case, like I said, we've seen the case with the Netherlands, where they have recognized that it's in their best interests, because the interesting situation in the Netherlands is that a lot of their former colonies are still part of the Netherlands. So it's in their best interest because of their connections, like many of these places.
So in other words, it's a strategy to reduce migration.
Well,
because you don't necessarily want to be bombarded. If there is that ease of travel from colony to motherland,
right,
and the colony is not developed, you can get bombarded, and to keep them away, you develop them.
I think sure, that could be part of it, but I think a major part of it is that it creates better relations. Because they recognize that there is a problem between these different populations, and if you don't try to achieve that equality and dealing with slavery and the impact of slavery, you're not going to achieve that. So you're going to have that disparity, that disagreement, even anger still existing within your country. So I think definitely that is something that they want to avoid, and they recognize that it's in everybody's best interest if we address this.
Okay.
And they've gone ahead and do it. I think we saw it in the Commonwealth when the British Prime Minister basically said, "Yo guys, we need to move on," and Carrie Combs like, "No, I don't think so," and forced it upon them and said, "No, we need to discuss this." So I think it's in our interest to let them know it's in their best interest as well, because we see the British want to come and because of their Brexit, that they want to make deeper connections within the Commonwealth. So we need to use that to our benefit as well.
So how do we apply the pressure, as it were, and make the argument that it is in your best interest, Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, to treat with us?
I think it's becoming impossible to not treat. We saw the case when you look at Haiti, for example. I think the evidence is so clear that France has to get to the table, because the pressure is being put on, that you have to deal with this. Look at where Haiti is today. You have to look at this.
But do you believe that we will see an instance, and anyone can respond to any of these questions, of course, where France will give the money back? I'm not even talking reparations now. The money that they collected from Haiti for hundreds of years for their freedom, they will give it back.
They have to do something. I don't know what that's going to be, but they have to do something.
And Angus will speak. Reparations is the best path to resolve the issue of institutional racism within countries and between countries. If you look at the global structure of societies and countries, you will see you cannot escape the fact that countries that were formerly that colonize others, the colonizers, they are more developed than former colonized countries. And no, it has not just taken economic divisions, but you can see as well when we speak of the global north and global south, there is racial component to it as well. And you cannot escape these things. Now, if you look at the BBC and so on, the issue of immigration, they are dealing with the issue of immigration. As poor societies continue to be poor, you find that persons continue to look for greener pastures. And those greener pastures are the heading up north. So tackle, for the Europeans to tackle the issues of immigration and illegal immigration and so on and so forth, the societies that they continue to make impoverish, you will see that persons are, look out throughout Latin America and so on. Why do you think persons risk their lives to go to the US, traveling across different countries throughout Latin America and so on, with fear of gangs and violent gangs and starvation and so on and so forth? But as Angus said, the pressure needs to be kept within the society, so we are agitating within the English and British and Dutch and French societies. And let's not forget that there are other countries in Europe, like Germany and Sweden and Switzerland and so on, that were not actively part of the slave trade and slavery in terms of owning colonies, but they invested in the trade and they benefited from the profits. Yes, I mean, countries like Switzerland and so on, they produce the iron ores and so, all right, to create the shackles and so on, so that throughout the European continent, we have to appreciate that the Atlantic slave trade and slavery was the biggest, the most profitable industry at the time. So not only the elite countries that were involved, but also right throughout Europe, Italy, and so on, they would have benefited by making these investments in the trade. So that we have to, apart from our heads of state, speaking to them at that level, at the Commonwealth heads, at the United Nations and so on, we need to have lobby as well within these societies, within this community, within the Netherlands and France and so on, Africans and persons of African diaspora rising up and speaking with regards to the issue of reparations, so that we have, and also too, let's not forget, building strategic linkages with families and organizations like the heirs of the enslavers in England and so on. Universities are coming forward, University of Liverpool, universities of Birmingham and so on, Harvard University and so on. All of these universities are now, when they look at where their source funding came from, they are sourcing it from the profits of slavery and slave trade. And it is more than an issue of their conscience. But yes, as we would say in Grenada, we want their conscience to juke them, and juke them really hard. But of course, it goes way beyond the issues of conscience. Their wealth, they cannot escape it, is on the blood and sweat of our African ancestors. And we must never, ever let them forget that.
Well, it's almost time to wrap up, so I need some closing comments. So this is what I'm going to do. Rochelle, I'm going to ask you to speak directly to Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell in terms of what you would like to move this process forward. Angus, I would like you to speak to the chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, Sir Hilary Beckles. And Ali, you will speak to the CARICOM heads of government in terms of what you would like to see in order to move this process forward. Rochelle, you're first up.
Yes, thank you. Honorable Deacon Mitchell, our Prime Minister, I have seen what you've done. I heard what you did. I see what you've done. I know you're doing a great and marvelous job. But I would like you to take the initiative to build the factories and to govern the people from your heart like you are doing. Build the factories so that we could sustain our food security. I would like you to do that. Thank you.
All right. Angus?
You want to get me in trouble?
No, I want you to speak from the heart, just as Rochelle did.
I would say, I think in looking at I think, first of all, before going there, I do think we need a stronger committee from Grenada.
I would argue a commission.
A commission.
Because a committee seems like an ad hoc group.
Right.
And more importance and priority ought to be paid to this.
Right. So I think from here, we need to get a better foundation. We need to have our own bank account. So monies will come directly to us that are meant for us, so that we have control over it. So I would say we would like Sir Hillary to work with Grenada to help us establish that and give us that foundation so we could be on equal footing when we discuss these issues with the other islands and within the larger grouping.
Okay. Ali?
To the heads of government, including my head of government, all of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, and all of its individual committees and commissions throughout the region, we need greater funding from central government so that we can create, establish secretariats with a full-time staff, that we can embark on national educational programs and so on and so forth. And as Angus said, strengthen the CARICOM Reparations Commission. As it is now, all of us are volunteers basically, and we give up our time and make sacrifices. But we believe that the work for reparative justice must be properly funded by the individual territories, because it's not just the work of, advocacy globally or to the colonizers, but we have tremendous work to do at home, especially within the areas of education and so on and so forth. All this research work that we speak of in terms of renaming streets and so on, we already started doing the research and documentation of who do we consider our heroes and so on and so forth. The Reparations Committee would want to embark and to assist in that regard, but we need better support so that we can strengthen our advocacy both at home and abroad. And thank you very much for having us, and for the very first time. I always complain that the British press, the French press, they carry more press releases and news stories with regards to reparations and our local press. So we hopefully, from GBN, we can be invited to speak at St. George's University, TAMCC. We have been through different secondary schools and primary schools on the island, but we are open for invitation from any institution or group so that we can come to speak with our fellow citizens on the issue of reparations. So we are here offering ourselves, making ourselves available to any school or institution in Grenada that want to hear us speak and to share on the subject of reparative justice. Thank you so much for having us.
Ali Gill, Chair of the Grenada National Reparations Committee, Dr. John Angus Martin, member, Sir Rochelle Charles, member. Thank you all so very much for being with us this evening and sharing the perspectives. And to you, ladies and gentlemen, it's always a pleasure to have you with us on Beyond the Headlines. And I look forward to being with you again in 6 days, 22.5 hours. Have yourselves a wonderful evening and good week. Take care.